In a world where power often drowns out truth, and wealth can bury the cries of the voiceless, one young boy's courage pierced through the silence. On the day the billionaire Gregory Wellingham buried his daughter, a homeless child stepped forward, not to beg but to reveal a truth that would shatter everything. With just 4 words, "Your daughter is alive," he unraveled a story far more harrowing, far more human, than any fortune could contain. This is not just a tale of loss and resurrection. It's a story about deception, redemption, and the unimaginable bond between a grieving father and a boy the world tried to forget. What would you do if the person you buried was never really gone, and the only one who knew slept under a bridge? Let us begin. The sky had not yet cleared. Gray clouds hung low like a veil over the Wellingham estate, and the rain from hours before still glistened on the marble steps of the private chapel. Inside, the mourners wore black, but none grieved harder than Gregory Wellingham, the billionaire whose name could shake markets, yet now trembled under the unbearable weight of a father's loss. His daughter, Amelia, just 16, had died in a fire that consumed their lake house. The remains were barely recognizable, the officials said, but the DNA had confirmed it. Or so Gregory had believed. He stood at the front, stone-faced, as the casket was lowered. No tears. Only silence. The kind of silence that comes when every scream has already been swallowed by disbelief. But as the crowd began to disperse, a figure approached from the edge of the grounds, barefoot, drenched from the puddles, eyes wide with something that looked like both fear and urgency. A boy no older than 10. His clothes hung loose and torn, like he hadn't had a warm place in weeks. And yet his voice, when it cut through the silence, was steady. "Mr. Wellingham," he said, "your daughter is alive." Time froze. Heads turned. Security moved in. But Gregory held up a hand, transfixed by the boy's eyes that didn't flinch, not even under the scrutiny of guards and guests. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice barely audible. The boy swallowed. "I know where she is. I saw her, and she's scared." It was absurd. Insulting. And yet, something in the child's tone, calm, certain, heartbreakingly sincere, stabbed through Gregory's numbness like a blade. And so, instead of turning away, the billionaire did something no one expected. He knelt down to look the boy in the eye. Thus began a journey no one could have imagined, one that would unearth not only the fate of a lost daughter, but the secrets of an empire built on lies. As mourners gathered around the gleaming mahogany casket, each face was painted with sorrow, each flower laid down with reverence. Gregory Wellingham, the billionaire whose heart had once been as unshakable as his empire, stood motionless. His eyes empty, his soul shattered. The photo perched on the easel beside the casket. His daughter, Eliza, all bright eyes and defiant curls, seemed to mock the silence she left behind. But just as the priest began to speak, a quiet disturbance stirred in the back row. A young voice, soft, uncertain, cut through the grief like a draft beneath a locked door. "She's not dead." Heads turned. Some in confusion, others in irritation. But Gregory froze. The voice belonged to a boy, no older than 10. His clothes hung in tatters, soaked from the lingering rain, his skin smeared with city dust and hunger. A homeless child no one recognized, certainly not someone invited. He took a hesitant step forward, clutching a crumpled photo in his hand. "I saw her. Last week. Behind the train yard. She gave me her coat, told me not to tell anyone. Said people were watching." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A woman fainted. Security moved fast, but Gregory raised a trembling hand. "Let him speak," he whispered, his voice hoarse with disbelief. The boy held out the photo. It was Eliza. Same eyes. Same coat. But the timestamp on the back, dated 3 days after the crash, struck like lightning. In that single moment, grief gave way to confusion. Mourning bent under the weight of possibility. And for Gregory, the funeral turned into something else entirely, not an ending but a beginning. A beginning that smelled of danger, secrets, and the faint scent of his daughter's perfume still clinging to a stranger's coat. The grand corridors of the Wellingham estate echoed with a silence too heavy for a house once filled with laughter. Gregory sat at the edge of his late daughter's music room, staring at the untouched piano where Emily once played Chopin with her eyes closed and a smile on her lips. But outside the gates, where marble ended and the real world began, a different story stirred. The boy who had stood drenched in rain at the funeral, the one no one dared question, now sat under a bridge near Westbridge Avenue. His name was Miles. He clutched a photograph, a torn, sun-bleached picture of a girl with Emily's unmistakable smile. She wasn't alone in the image. Her arm was slung around Miles's shoulders like a sister would. Scrawled on the back in her handwriting were the words, "Home isn't a place, it's who you're with." That night, Gregory's longtime housekeeper, Martha, walked in on a strange call placed from the study's old landline. It was Gregory speaking to someone with urgency. "If there's even a 1% chance, I want her found. I'll fund the entire search myself." Martha's heart skipped. She had seen what Gregory hadn't. On the day of the funeral, when everyone else looked away from the strange boy at the gate, Emily's dog Roscoe hadn't. The old retriever had bounded to the boy, tail wagging, nuzzling him like family. And now, quietly, questions were beginning to surface, like cracks in a mask too long worn. Who was this homeless boy really? Why did he show up at the funeral with Emily's locket? And most haunting of all, what if the coffin buried beneath the Wellingham estate didn't hold a daughter at all? The stage was shifting. And the truth, long buried beneath marble and memory, had begun to whisper. The auction house, once filled with murmurs and casual laughter, now fell into a strange and electric silence. Everyone had heard the girl's soft reply, but no one quite believed it. Gregory Wellingham's name held weight, power, and mystery. It was a name spoken in business circles with awe and fear. And now, it had just been uttered by a homeless black boy and affirmed by a pale, nervous girl who clutched a locket like it was life itself. The auctioneer stammered. "Why, you said Gregory Wellingham is your father?" The girl nodded, her eyes not leaving the necklace. "He gave this to my mother, before she disappeared. And this boy," she gestured to the boy beside her, "he was the only one who knew where to find me." A low gasp rippled through the room. Whispers ignited like wildfire. "Is this some stunt? She's bluffing, has to be." But then, something shifted. An older woman in the back, clearly a longtime staff member, squinted at the girl, her face going pale. "That nose, those eyes," she whispered. "She looks just like him. Like Gregory when he was young." And then came the security guard, nervous, unsure, holding a folded letter he claimed was found in the envelope left behind by the boy. It was addressed in Wellingham's handwriting. The room collectively inhaled as the letter was handed to the auctioneer. He opened it slowly, read, blinked, then turned to the girl, stunned. "It's true," he breathed. This is his daughter." And suddenly what had begun as an unremarkable auction became a moment frozen in legend. A girl once forgotten now reclaimed by fate, and a boy once dismissed now holding the key to a billionaire's hidden past. And yet, this was only the beginning. Late one evening, as Elena wandered the corridors of the Wellingham estate, unable to sleep, a strange instinct pulled her toward her late mother's old room, a space long sealed since her death. The door creaked open and dust floated like ghosts in the moonlight. Everything remained untouched, as if waiting for someone brave enough to return. As she stepped inside, her fingers brushed across a faded jewelry box. Inside it, tucked beneath a silk handkerchief, was a sealed envelope. On it, in delicate handwriting, were the words, "To be opened only if the truth ever matters." Elena hesitated, heart pounding. Then she opened it. The contents were not what she expected. It wasn't a love letter or a will. It was a confession from her mother. In trembling ink, her mother revealed a secret she had carried alone. Gregory Wellingham was not Elena's biological father. Years ago, in a desperate moment during her husband's prolonged absence, she had sought solace in the arms of another man. A mankind unknown to society who later died tragically in a factory fire. But Gregory had known. He had discovered the truth, yet chose to raise Elena as his own, not out of love but out of obligation and pride. That revelation crushed the last pillar of certainty in Elena's life. Everything, the wealth, the name, the legacy, was built on a lie. She fell to her knees, the letter trembling in her hands. But in that moment of collapse, something within her shifted. Not born of Gregory's blood? Then she owed him nothing. And maybe, just maybe, that meant she was finally free to live not as a Wellingham heiress but as her mother's daughter. And that quiet strength, flickering within her like a spark in dry grass, would soon become a wildfire. And then, just as the billionaire reached for his umbrella to leave, the boy stepped forward. Thin, soaked, trembling, but his voice rang out like thunder in the silence. "Sir, your daughter is alive." The sentence hung in the air, absurd and impossible. The billionaire froze, every bone in his body stiff with disbelief. Slowly he turned to face the boy. No one moved. Even the rain seemed to pause. Gregory Wellingham's lips parted, barely able to form the words. "What did you say?" The boy swallowed hard. His eyes, sunken but bright with conviction, never wavered. I saw her 3 nights ago. She was asking for help. She was taken. She's not dead." Gasps erupted around them as if the cemetery itself exhaled. The priest dropped his Bible. The security guards shifted uneasily. Gregory's heart began to pound against his ribs like a prisoner trying to escape. People dismissed it as a cruel trick, a homeless child's delusion. But something in the boy's gaze, something unwavering and wild, pierced the billionaire's doubt. Gregory stepped forward, looking the boy in the eye. "Where?" The boy hesitated, tears mingling with the rain. "If I take you, you must promise. You won't call the police. Or she'll vanish again." That was the moment. A fork in the road. Logic screamed to walk away, but a father's heart doesn't always answer to logic. He nodded once. "Show me." And just like that, a funeral turned into a chase. Not for closure, but for a second chance. The boy's voice cracked as he finally whispered her name. "Amelia?" "Her name is Amelia." Gregory froze. His breath hitched in his chest, his hands trembling not from the chill but from the shock of recognition. That name, Amelia, had not left his lips in years, yet here it was, spoken by a homeless child under a city bridge, echoing like a ghost from a life he thought lost forever. "You knew her?" Gregory's voice was barely a whisper, afraid that any louder and the fragile truth would shatter. "I didn't just know her," the boy said, looking him in the eye. "She was my only friend. She used to give me her lunch when I was hungry. She said her father would come find her someday. And when he did, she'd tell him I saved her." A silence stretched between them, so heavy it seemed to slow time. Gregory's knees buckled, and he sank onto the curb beside the boy. For the first time in decades he wept, not as a billionaire, not as a public figure, but as a father. A broken father, rediscovering the trail of a daughter he thought had vanished with the storm of that tragic night. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Gregory finally asked, his voice a blend of gratitude and heartbreak. "I didn't know who to trust," the boy admitted. "And I thought, no one would believe me. Not someone like me." Gregory reached out, placing a trembling hand on the boy's shoulder. "You believed in her when no one else could. And today, you gave a grieving father a second chance." As the rain returned, gentle and quiet this time, it fell not as a curtain of sorrow, but a quiet benediction. Gregory didn't care about the dirt on his suit, the damp on his skin, or the glances of passers-by. He was no longer the man people knew. He was a father on a mission to find his child, and a man indebted forever to a boy the world had discarded. And for the first time in years he didn't feel alone. Sometimes, the loudest revolutions happen in silence. When a woman refuses to be mocked, when a mother shields her child with nothing but dignity, and when truth walks quietly through a door wearing no crown, but leaving behind a kingdom changed forever. That evening may have started as a stage for ridicule, for cruelty disguised as class. But by its end, the laughter had faded, and in its place rose something far more lasting: respect, awe, and a lesson no ballroom could forget. Because when you judge someone by their title, you blind yourself to their worth. But when you choose to see with the heart, you'll often find greatness standing in places you never expected. Like a maid, gently guiding her daughter forward, teaching her not how to serve but how to rise. And that, perhaps, is the truest kind of elegance. The kind that doesn't need approval, only truth. This is such an amazing story. Dear friends, if you liked the video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. There is still a lot of interesting things to come.